Hello.
Hey,
How's it going?
good. Can I ask you why you have a pair of legs in your behind you?
Oh, oh yeah. It's a mannequin.
No problem. I just like joined and I'm like, why are
Yeah.
there legs?
He used to be inside that, and then it started to fall over. So there's like half of a suit of armor body there, half of a suit of armor, and then there's another one behind me.
So my mother actually does a lot of sewing, and so we also for a long time had like a bunch of mannequins in our house, and it would like freak me out anytime like I had to go downstairs in the middle of the night and just see like a
Yes.
body. So,
Yeah, there have been because it was in our dining room for a long time. But then if my wife took the armor off, it would be quite terrifying to just suddenly see like a fully grown man just standing in the dining room.
yep,
Oh,
yep.
my wife is saying thanks for sharing my alpha on storage. Cosplay the family way. Go away! There are spoilers here. She is on day two still.
Oh wow,
Yeah, we've lived a life. Oh my goodness. Oh, how are things going on your end?
things are great.
That is
Things are going
fabulous.
really well. I was talking on my Instagram actually last night. I finished. I've been working on my own story on my own novel, and last night I finished my fourth draft, rewrite, edit, which is super exciting.
That
And
is
I actually
awesome.
started a Discord, so if you guys want, you can check me out on Instagram or message me. But it's hopefully gonna be really fun.
Nice. What is the theme of the Discord? Your books, your art, both?
Well, the Discord is for like for my beta readers to be able to give you feedback, but I wanted to also like open it up to other people that also like reading and writing and art and hopefully be able to like connect artists with writers and, get some dialogue going and basically just the stuff that I'm interested in. So,
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, I remembered you positing, I think, some version of that in a couple of the discords, and
yeah, I've been
so
wanting
yeah,
to for a while, and then I figured like this will be a really great way for me to get like feedback all in one place from, beta readers, but then I was like, well, I might as well like, open it up to other people who want to join. So,
yeah,
yeah.
that is awesome. One sec. What's that? Soon. She knows to come and talk to you. Damn it. I thought maybe you were screaming, but I was listening after you stopped, and so I missed it. Go. Go have fun. Like rest in your bed. Mama will be there soon. Oh man. Um, we've gotten a couple. Salty James, Ancient Suds. We will absolutely answer those questions in a moment. We're getting into the rhythm. Um, love to see lots and lots and lots of questions. Do you want to say hi again?
Hi.
Hi. Aw.
Get some paper.
What?
Get some paper.
Yes, you can get some paper. Yeah, I have Dalinar and All Might and Deku as office inspirations because they are fun characters. Do you do any anime or anything like that?
Does Last Airbender count? That's
Absolutely,
the,
absolutely, that
okay.
counts. Yeah,
Okay, so that's the only like foray into anime that I have at this point. But I get a lot of people asking me like if I've, read any or watched any, and not yet. So
totally fair. Totally fair. I hear my son calling. I'll be right back.
no problem.
Oh.
So those of you in the chat while we're waiting for CJ, let me know if you're a fantasy writer as well. I feel like if you read fantasy, you almost always also dabble in writing fantasy, even if you're not interested so much in like, sharing your work. But I think it's always fun to find, other fantasy writers. So let me know. And let me know what your story is about if you're writing one. Or you don't have to.
ancient suds, never be ashamed of what you're writing.
Yeah, don't be ashamed. I was asking while you were out, being a dad. So I was like asking if anybody else is a writer, because I feel like there's a high percentage of crossover between fantasy readers and fantasy writers, probably more so than other genres. So
yeah, I mean yeah. I mean, certainly compared to like, maybe that's a self-selection almost, but like, because if you think of like readers of all books, so few of yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, I guess like, yeah, you'd have to like take like a survey of like, I feel like the interesting thing about like fantasy readers is that like fantasy readers are kind of their own thing. Like if you read fantasy, then you primarily read fantasy and sci-fi. Like, yeah, you might dabble in other things, but I feel like there's a certain like personality type. So whereas I think people who read, contemporary or read other like mysteries or whatever, like mysteries is kind of a thing also. Like if you read mysteries and you like only read mysteries, but I feel like a lot of fantasy readers that I meet also want to try writing fantasy. So
yeah, I think there's something about the way in which it focuses on storytelling that if that captures you, you want to tell your own stories. It's like you haven't stopped loving that aspect of it, of storytelling, maybe.
I feel like it's the aspect of creation, right? It's like the amount of creativity and creation that has to go into fantasy, and also like fantasy readers tend to also be the type of people who are like, yeah, I want to explore other worlds, and so they're also thinking about like, well, if I had to create a world, what would it be like? And there's like a real element of creativity amongst fantasy readers, whereas I think other readers have different things that they're looking for. But so I don't know, because there's an interesting like crossover between like fantasy readers and fantasy writers that tend to be there tends to be a lot of those crossover.
Yeah, I like that. It's not something I've thought about necessarily before, but I think that's on point. Let's see. We had a question. Salty James said, "Did we ever learn what Vivenna was doing on Roshar? Do you think we'll get more from her?" I think she was looking for Vasher and Nightblood, and it seems like she left without finding either of them. But it's a little unclear at the end of Oathbringer what her plan is.
Yeah, I mean, I think she pretty explicitly states at the end, tell Vasher like I'm looking for him or something. Like she doesn't quite say it like that, but she sort of is like, yeah, that guy with that sword you're talking about, I'm looking for him. There's a lot of stuff that concerns the Warbreaker characters that is left to the unknown. In fact, that's one of my I love the book Warbreaker, but it does end with sort of like in the middle of the story a little bit.
Yes.
And then it picks up again, or like we pick up with the characters again, at least Vivenna and Vasher, and it's like a whole lot of stuff has happened and you don't know what it is. There's just a lot of mystery surrounding that world and those characters.
I think we were both like a monkey's paw, curse and bless, when it comes to Warbreaker and Rhythmatist, because those were two books that Brandon wrote that absolutely promise a sequel, and then he felt terrible about it for the next 15 to 20 years for those two books. So I think that it's helped him realize he shouldn't write sequel bait into the ends of books unless he actually knows when he's gonna come back and do that.
Yeah, the weird thing about Warbreaker is like usually Brandon is really good about like having an ending, and for some reason like Warbreaker, it does have an ending, but it also ends off with like, yeah, there's this army that's marching towards Idris, I think that's the name of the country, and it's like they maybe will stop them. It's like a very weird place to stop. But like the character arcs are wrapped up, right? Like Ciri and Sebron and Lightsong and Vivenna and Vasher, like all of their, there's sort of, okay, we're going to move on into the future, and you see Vivenna leaving with Vasher, so it's like sort of someday there'll be more, but it is a very weird book in terms of like how it ends.
It is yes.
That's a very long answer to, I don't remember who asked that question, but basically we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know what she's up to. I wouldn't be shocked if she came back at some point. it seems like you have those people there because you plan to reveal something about them at some point, but it's been very much a background character for the last 12 years of Words of Radiance onward. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean now we're gonna see Vasher training Lift, I guess.
Mhm.
So like we know that we know what Vasher's gonna be doing. It seems like it shouldn't be that hard to find him. Like if Vivenna really wanted to find him, she kind of knows where he is. So
Well, that was my favorite little bit, is in Oathbringer. If she had just stayed with them, they would have brought her right to Vasher, but she leaves because she's like, no, I gotta find it this way. I'm gonna go this way and find him faster. And it's like, you just had to wait one more journey.
I mean, also like she takes like a long detour by becoming the head of the wall guard. So it's like doesn't seem like it's that urgent that she has to find him. But.
Yeah, it'll be curious to see if they had a falling out. If did she try to make something and now she needs help with? Who knows? It's very confusing. Ancient Suds brings up the theory about Taravangian losing Alethkar at the end of Wind and Truth. We have talked about that. We are interested to see if Brandon picks it back up. It's one of those things that since he didn't say anything about it explicitly, maybe. It at least seems to be the laws, but who knows what'll happen in between the time skip.
For people who don't know what they're talking about, do you want to explain?
Yeah, so basically the idea is that one of the only things we know about Alethi law, besides that if you capture the capital, you capture the country, is that if you kill the king's wit, it is lawful, but you forfeit all of your land and titles. Taravangian, as retribution, kills the king's wit, which would then, in theory, forfeit. Besides, you can kill the wit. You're just then legally required to forfeit your land and titles. So any Alethi land and titles would, in theory, be forfeited. Now, Brandon does remember this. He was asked about it at Nexus. He said, yes, you're right. It does mean certain things to kill the king's wit. Now there's the question, though, of what did Yasna actually control at that point? Like, did she control anything? She didn't. She had like a treaty with Venli, and that was about it. So it'd be interesting to see if anybody's able to make hay of that after the time skip and bring that back up to Retribution. Because I could see the honor inside of Retribution caring about that law and wanting to follow the promise, the oath to fulfill that law.
I mean, to be honest, they might actually be better off in the tower at this point, because there's like no sun.
Oh yeah.
In Alethkar, and so they might just be better off in the tower at this point. So.
It's not a great time for the world.
No.
At all.
Nope. I'm still kind of wondering how everybody is surviving without any sunlight. Seems difficult, but I guess we'll have to wait a really long time to find out.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that says you couldn't at some point start to let there be some light come through, or maybe like we said before, like maybe the rays are still able to get through the clouds, but the like illumination doesn't, but the waves that provide vitamins and stuff are able, who knows. Right. Magic. It's magic.
I mean, I'm assuming Odium had a plan because he doesn't want everyone to die, so they have to be able to grow food and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, what he plans to do with the light is going to be interesting, because we see him doling it out to the Shattered Plains peoples. The Singers are able to get some because they're kind of neutral, not completely against him, not completely for him. So I'm intrigued to see, what does society look like. I heard some really cool pitches that we could get, like protagonists that are, singers who have grown up in one of the occupied, like one of the cities of Retribution that exists now. That'd be super cool.
That would be really cool. And I wonder, like, if we could maybe add them to our list of young Avengers, young
Yeah.
Radiants. Could be sort of like a young Relaine would be like, you know, a really interesting character to explore, or just, you know, explore Relaine more. But I think Relaine, I would love to see like a little bit more in depth of like somebody
Yeah.
who, you know, kind of cross over to a different side. But you know, grew up in, yeah, because it's really interesting because now sort of the singers are the ones in charge, right? So that now they have the power,
Yeah.
and that would
It's
be
gonna happen.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Dark Eyes would be an interesting POV as well. Like, how do they see the world under Retribution? Um, it will be. I mean, Odie. In theory, this is like his chance to test his like, can I be the good god that takes care of the whole planet? Because he'll have the entire planet under his control except for Azir and Urithiru and the
Yeah, and like,
Shattered
what if he
Plains.
is really good? Like, what if he actually, you know,
Right? In the
like that
short
would be a
term.
really, yeah. I mean, that would be an interesting place to take it. You know, like, you know, okay, well, I mean, for to be honest, for the singers, it could hardly have gotten worse. You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
it'll be interesting. I mean, that's sort of like that's kind of what Red Rising is like in the second half of it. Without spoiling it, it's sort of like, well, what if actually the tyrants had a point?
Yeah.
And you know, democracy is messy. Um, so without going into Hamilton lyrics, but you know, that's sort of, it's a really interesting question of like, well,
Yeah.
you know, what if Odium isn't awful on this planet, and what do you do?
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah. If I was guessing, I would imagine it's going to be fairly benevolent with a high fascism control angle of, you know, Fen is wanting to trade with other worlds and he's like, no, you may not, you know, because we can't cross contaminate. We got to all be one planet, otherwise I lose my control over things. I could see something like that where you have people. That's kind of the natural tension. Is like, hey, benevolence but no freedom seems likely to occur, but we'll see.
Right. I mean, it would be interesting because, you know, see, I don't know if it's so much Brandon's style because he likes to have his heroes who are heroes and his villains who are villains. Like, he doesn't like to do a lot of, you know, and Taravangian is a really interesting villain, but he's also gotten a lot more just straight up villainous, I think,
Yeah.
as the story has gone on. So I don't know if at this point it would be set up where we could do something like, you know, actually Taravangian is really moral, is like, you know, kind of, there's some morality, like there's, you know, he's morally gray, but he's leans towards, you know, good at times. I don't know if that's really where Brandon wants to go, like considering the rest of the Cosmere.
Yeah.
I think like the most morally gray we get is like Kelsier, and even he's like, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, it's Kelsier and Taravangian would probably get along in a lot of ways, right? They both have this idea of it is okay to kill people in order to accomplish my ends, even people that may be innocent. I mean, I'm thinking about the hospitals. I'm thinking about the nobles' guards, who, you know, are not the most evil in the world, but they are helping the system and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like with Kelsier, there's a slightly more altruism there, just because Taravangian was murdering people who were helpless, like people in a hospital.
Oh yeah.
Whereas Kelsier, at least he's saying like he doesn't he kill like it's still wrong, like murder is wrong, but at the same time, he justifies it by saying these are people who made a choice to help
Yeah.
people that are wrong, in my eyes, and so therefore I have to, you know. And actually, this is a really, you know, switching over to Mistborn for a second. This is like one of a really interesting conversation that he has with Marsh in the beginning of the Final Empire, where Marsh is like, you know, these people felt like they had no choice, and he's like, so, you know, and there's a really interesting dichotomy between the two of them. But I would say that at least with Kelsier, you could give him the benefit of the doubt of like, sometimes in a situation like that, like Kelsier's at war, right? So that's how he sees it, and he's like, I have to, you know, do this, even though, you know, I wish I could spare people who, you know, I wish I could spare these people, I can't. Whereas Taravangian was just straight up murdering people. So
Yeah, I mean, that's where Taravangian really does struggle for me to maintain his morality, because you do have Cultivation pointing out at the beginning of this book, hey, you could just stop the war right now. Like, nobody else needs to die. If you think about it on a reread perspective, Adolin doesn't need to lose a foot. The children of Azir don't need to have their city burning. Thunderclass don't need to go storming through the city. Like, none of that is necessary for the war to end. All that has to happen is Taravangian sit down with Dalinar and say, okay, let's figure this out. What's even dumber, it's very frustrating, I feel like there are plenty of people who would sign up for an eternal space war. Like, he doesn't even need to win the war on Roshar. Just stop and be like, hey, who wants to come take over the galaxy with me? Dalinar would let them. Dalinar's not going to stop people from joining Odium if that's what they want to do. Like, leave the planet? Okay, whatever. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, this is where it gets like a little bit confusing, especially with like the way that Dalinar ends. It's because he sort of, does push the Cosmere into, you guys deal with this problem.
Yes.
So it doesn't seem like he's that thrilled with the idea of Odium taking over, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of.
I don't think he would like it. I just think Dalinar's position would be, all right, make your choice. Like, if you want to go fight. Oh yeah, I mean, Sadeas, right? Like, he lets Sadeas make his decisions. If they weren't underneath him, right? So then, like, the Knights Radiant, I don't think he would be on board with going, because he would see them as his soldiers. But if like High Princes or Azir or whoever wanted to join, I think he'd say, all right, I mean, I don't want you to do that, but that's your choice. Like, go off.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, we talked about this a lot when the first interlude, I think it was by the first interludes, of sort of, this is where Taravangian is both really interesting and also very not interesting as a villain, in that, like, it's a really interesting idea to take, like, the whole kind of mythos surrounding Taravangian, where he's given this, like, extreme intelligence but no empathy, versus empathy but very little intelligence, and then he, like, Cultivation's whole plan, and then making him into a god, and then it all goes horribly wrong. Like, all that's really interesting. But then the conversation that he has with Cultivation, where she's like, just stop, and he's like, no, I can't do that because, evil villain plan reasons. And it's like, oh yeah, you're just the evil villain guy. So that's why I'm like really interested to see like what happens with Retribution, because, we could, I don't know where we're going to go with it, right? Like, either he could go into full on mustache twirling villain, which I'd be okay with, because I actually think we have a lack of those in fiction, but right now, but also he could go like into more of like what I was talking about with Red Rising, where it's like, you're clearly the villain but you also have some legitimate points. So
yeah, I'm thinking about how honestly, is Ardenth and Delof, is that like the closest to mustache twirling villain we get in the Cosmere? I'm trying to think of anybody else. But those two are pretty good examples.
Delof's pretty mustache twirly.
Yeah.
Den,
like very much so.
yeah.
Hrathen, yes, it was all according to my plan.
Yeah, I mean, the most mustache twirly villain is still Straff. Like, Straff is by far the most horrifically evil person in the Cosmere. Like, has no redeeming.
Yeah.
Like, the whole thing.
That's amazing. Hold on, we got out of sync somewhere. I thought you were taking a very long dramatic pause. And I was like, wait a minute, nope. It's been too long. That's not a long dramatic pause.
Okay, well, where'd you lose me?
You were like, no redeeming qualities.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
it seemed like you were like pausing to emphasize the no redeeming qualities.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I think I was gonna say that I think Delof is basically there as well, but like, at least there was some sort of story about like him losing his wife or something, and that motivated him, I think. Isn't that what it is? Like, he lost his wife to an Elantrian bullet.
Oh, Delof. Yeah. He has his wife. They can't save his wife.
Right. So at least there's like some motivation. Straff is just like, I love being evil. I mean, that's just all there is to him.
Yes. Oh, Tom, welcome in. Tom
Yes, welcome,
said,
Tom.
Cosmere Live, don't get these often on my feed. Yeah, man. Me and Chandler are here almost every Sunday night chatting about Wind and Truth for a long time now because, man, that we can just, it's forever. This book just keeps going and going and going.
There's so much. In fact, like I kind of feel like at this point I need to do a bit of a reread just because I'm all of the when it's like fresh in your mind, I like can remember everything, and now I'm like, wait, I don't remember everything. So I feel like I need to go back and like reread a lot of the Tanavast chapters and the stuff that was like heavy lore dumping. You know what we have never talked about is the story that Dalinar sees with Ba'ada Mishram when he sees what happens to Ba'ada Mishram, and you see the love story between the human guy who I cannot remember and the singer, I think the singer, right?
Yeah, the singer. Yeah.
I loved that. I thought
That
it was
was
so emotional, and it was such a like it really worked for me. I think like especially when, you know, this book that was so heavy on lore, but Brandon did a really good job of making all of the lore very character focused, and I thought this was a good example of that.
Yes. I read a quite lengthy critique of Wind and Truth on Reddit today, and I'll say a thought, and then my son is calling quite vigorously. But I do agree. I think the flashbacks were not just world building, it was always human story, and that one was just beautiful. All right, I'll be right back.
No problem.
Yes.
Yeah, let's see. Rob Jordan just finished Wind and Truth today. Awesome. So you'll have it like really fresh in your mind while we're like, wait, who is that again? What was that again? Oh, so you know what? It's funny. Eric Fury says, I think I may have read that same critique today. It's really funny because I haven't been looking at a lot of the critique for Wind and Truth. I tend not to do that when I really enjoy something. I'm like, I don't really want to see all the people that disliked it. But every time I come across like a TikTok video or somebody's critique, the first thing they always say is like, it was way too long. And that to me always like feels so disingenuous because you're reading a Stormlight book. Like, you know, going into it that it's going to be long. Like, that's sort of the thing to it. And then people say like, oh, you know, and he needs a better editor. And I think people just don't really understand what editors do and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I mean, there's, like I've said, like there's legitimate critiques you can make of this book. Like, it's not perfect. But you know, I think like there's a lot of very disingenuous critique out there right now, at least in my opinion. Kevin says halfway through it, I don't want to finish. Don't want it to end. I know. By the way, there's going to be massive spoilers here, so please be careful. There's like full spoilers, so if you haven't finished Wind and Truth, you might want to jump away. Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Eric, it was a very long one. Kevin, run away. I'm sure you told Kevin to run already.
Yes, I told Kevin to run.
We're talking all the
rings, Kevin.
spoilers. This is not the place to be.
No.
Oh, man.
Unless you don't mind. Some people don't care.
It's true. It's true. This is the kind of book where, I mean, I definitely wouldn't have done it, but they get telling me these things were going to happen. Brandon is such a good sequence writer that if you told me where it was going, then I could just appreciate all the hints all the more. So, you know, it's one of those things like, oh, if you told me the Oath Pact was going to be reformed in a different way, like, oh, now I'm like looking for those things. So it's not the worst thing in the world to get some of these things spoiled, but you know. Let's see. Yeah. The juice is... What about the juice is always worth the squeeze? Is that Taravangian?
Oh, no, we were talking about the fact that, like, the main critique that I've been seeing is sort of, like, it's too long. And then it's like, okay. like I just don't, I can't take people seriously when that's your critique. It's a Stormlight book. Like, what do you? I mean, yeah, that's sort of the fun of reading it, is that it's kind of too long.
Well, and this one, I mean, he almost made it a bit of a meme, but I mean, he cut the Ars Arcana. In the printed version, the table of contents has no chapters. It only says numbers because they just didn't have enough room to print the dang book.
And like, also, I always want to say, I'm like, okay, what would you take out? Like, this is when people say things like, you know, oh, he needs a better editor. It's like, I don't think you know what an editor does. Like, the editor is not there to tell you how long your word count is. Like, that's not what editors do. But like, I never, whenever people say like it was too long, I'm always like, but they never give any examples of what they would have cut, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was trying to think if I've heard. I mean, one of the things in the one today was kind of funny because they got corrected pretty quickly, but they were complaining about Kaladin using the word therapist and Dalinar using the word siege engine, which somebody pointed out, like, they have siege engines, like that's a thing. They definitely have those. Like they don't have traditional warfare in quite the same way, but they do have those. And I still really stand by the idea that Wit gave Kaladin that word, and so he's just like a kid who's found a new word, and he's like, I'll use this new word that I just learned 2 days ago, through 5 days ago, whatever. So
I'll be honest, I didn't love that line either. Like, we've talked about, like, it wasn't my favorite line, but it's also like the book is 1,300 pages. Like, it's just not gonna, it's not, you know, if I liked the other 90% of it, like, one line that I didn't like is not gonna, you know, whatever. It's just you know, and also, like, I keep seeing these, especially, it's really funny. I think, like, each app or each social media has like their own response. So like mostly like Instagram and TikTok have been pretty positive with Wind and Truth. YouTube is like, you cannot find a positive review for Wind and Truth on YouTube. At least, I don't know. That's every time I come across a video, it's like, Brandon Sanderson's readers hate him now. And I'm like, we do? I'm like, I didn't know. I didn't get that memo.
I honestly, it's kind of weird. I sometimes will get into a place, and Wind and Truth was this book for me, where I don't want to know what anybody thinks about it because I'm happy with what I think about it. And I'm like, you could only make me think bad things at this point because I already know all the good things. And so I don't want any more. So I've not listened to Daniel Green or Murphy Napier, who are the two I typically will listen to. Or Bookborn. I haven't heard theirs.
I listened to Daniel Green, but I think like I listened to Daniel Green knowing how he feels about the rest of the series, and I've always been more positive about the series than he has. But he was pretty positive. He had some critiques, but they were kind of the same critiques that he had for the other books, and I don't share those critiques, so that was fine. And I also listened to Bookborn's, and she was very positive. You know, like, so yeah. I mean, but they're like. There's a, you know, not every book is going to be for everybody. That's totally okay. But like, for some reason, this book has been like, they're like, Brandon knows this was terrible. And I'm like, does he though? Like, I don't, like, where are you getting this information? It's like a very weird response. Some of it is probably like clickbaity or whatever, but yeah, it's just kind of a funny response to this book.
Yeah, well, I think there was that one interview he gave where he said, this is the biggest gamble of my career. If people hate me, it's going to be because of this book. So I can imagine people kind of memeing off of that and taking that and running with it.
Yeah. I mean, I set my like initial review was basically, if you read this book and you don't like it, you're off the Cosmere. Like, and if you read this book and you love it, you're like, I'm with the Cosmere till the end. Like, this is the point in the Cosmere where either you're on or off the train. And that's kind of what I've seen. A lot of people saying like, this didn't work for me, and it didn't work for me in a way that like I can no longer enjoy. Like, I don't like where it's going. And I had sort of the opposite effect where I was like, this is so cool to me. I loved the ending of Wind and Truth, and I'm so excited to see what's going forward. It's not like I don't have any critiques of this book, but it's just that the positives outweighed the negative for me.
Yeah. I mean, the end of this book, and I remember that we were talking about the singers. So I want to get back to that in a second. Yeah. But the ending of this book is very much the best version of the Marvel end credit scene type thing where you're like, okay, these people are coming together and we're seeing Kelsier, who's dealing with his situation on Scadrial, which is probably the end of the Lost Metal. And now, because somebody actually pointed out today to me that in the Lost Metal, they still talk about odium, not retribution. So probably we're looking at the 3 months it takes Shallan to get to the perpendicularity location of the Horneater Peaks and then get to that cell phone is the time it takes for like Lost Metal to occur, like the 20-ish years from Hoyt arriving, or 10-ish years for Era 2 to happen. And so then that conversation's happening at the very end of the Lost Metal, somewhere in that ballpark. But it's really exciting to think about those characters beginning to intersect, probably in Stormlight 6 onward. Like I would imagine Mistborn, Era 3, and Elantris will be kind of, they'll do their thing together, and then everything will start to come together after Stormlight 6 onward.
Yeah.
Josie said she really enjoyed it. Yeah, me too. I could not stop reading it. I am very glad I don't have books like this often, because I was up until 4 or 5 every single morning reading that book. I could not sustain that if that was a consistent life practice.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the other thing also, like, just to touch on this briefly, I know we want to, like, really focus in on Stormlight stuff, but I read a lot of books. Like, I read, like, 1 to 2 books a week, and, like, a lot of them are mid, you know, like that's just the reality. When you read a lot of books, you're going to get, like, most are not going to be amazing. And sometimes you'll even read like a book that's like 300 pages and it's like really hard to get through and you just don't care about any of the characters. And so when you read something like Wind and Truth that is 1,300 pages and it is gripping the whole time, I don't care what you say, like you have to appreciate that for what it is. Like there is some objective level. Like you can say it's not for me, you can have critiques of it, but like there has to be some objectivity of like, you know, this is an accomplishment. So,
you know, when I was trying to get the Wind and Truth advanced reader copy, which I never got more than just the first 2 days, but you know, one of these days, I grabbed another book because I was like, I should read some other stuff too. Like, why not? I can be, you know, an advanced reader reviewer for things. And I talked about this a long time ago, but it was just terrible. I mean, I truly read it and was like, this is a person who needed an editor. Like, this is a person where sentences stop making sense. It truly felt like someone had translated it from a different language half the time, like from the way that thoughts would just get lost. And I was like, I think I know what they're trying to say, but I'm not even sure. Yeah, I mean, I've never had that experience with a high fantasy that's respected well. You know, your Rothfuss, your Martin, your Jordan, your Sanderson. It was a whole different world. Your V.E. Schwab's, you know, just, you don't see that happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ancient Suds, we are super happy for Shallan's baby shower. It almost certainly means she's stuck on Roshar and not going to be part of Mistborn Era 3. That's a little sad. But other than that, I love that we have little baby Shallandalin, or whatever they're going to call him.
Do you think that Shallan will have a baby shower for her shower baby?
Oh, man. Who would come? I guess she could meet up with the Unseen. Is that why the Unseen Court got so much attention also? Because some of them got left at lasting integrity, and so we're gonna like see Shallan working with other people from the Unseen Court in Stormlight 6? Is that what's gonna happen?
I'll be honest. If we never hear from the Unseen Court again, I would not shed tears. Like, I just didn't find them all that interesting, but yeah, I'm sure we'll see them again. Like, you know.
Yeah. Like the armband boys, you know, from the Bridge 13 or whatever, that have the
Were
death.
they the Unseen Court?
No. I'm just saying, like, they're another group that we have to see more of at some point, because Brandon called attention to them and then they didn't kill Moash or get killed by Moash.
Yeah, I mean, now thinking about it, like I don't know if this was a thought that I had at the time, or maybe it's just I think that was certainly a Chekhov's Moash revenge group of like
Yeah.
Moash ain't going anywhere in this book. You guys are gonna have to wait because these guys are gonna be a much bigger. I don't know if they're gonna be a much bigger presence, but I think that they're going to be like it's gonna become a thing of like
Yeah.
the anti-Moash brigade.
I could easily see it as like the thing I talked about when it first got brought up is it seems really, really dangerous from a third and fourth ideal level. Like, how do you get to the third ideal of I will protect even those I hate if you're sworn to kill this one guy above everything else? Like, there's this level of it can hold you back potentially from progressing in your protection ideals if you're so committed to I will kill this one dude no matter what.
Well, I had two thoughts when you said that. One is there has to be some wiggle room, right? Like, Kaladin does kill people in the
Yes.
series. So there has to be some wiggle room, But also, the other thought that I had was going back to Avatar The Last Airbender, which is at the end, spoilers for Avatar The Last Airbender, at the end, because Aang is sort of from this very, very pacifist
Yes.
religion and culture, and he's kind of grappling with this idea of like, how do I maintain my spiritual identity by the same time I have to kill the Fire Lord? And one of the Yang Chen says to him, you are the Avatar, you don't have that luxury. Other airbenders can do that, but not you.
Yes.
And that's the other thing that kind of jumped into my head when you said that, of like, there may be some Radiants who are willing to sacrifice their progression in like Radiant Hood in order to take out Moash that they see as a bigger threat. I don't know if that's where this is going, but it's just sort of the thought that came to my head.
No, I love that idea. I think what I was thinking about also is Kaladin has always been held back by his vendettas. Like when he was consumed with Amaram and consumed with Rashon, he's like not able to progress with Syl, and it's only when he gets to the point where Dalinar's like, look, stop it, like you can't care about this guy anymore, like you got to go do other things, that he's able to see the bigger picture. So
but does that require Kaladin to save Amaram, right? Like if he's fighting Amaram,
yes, totally.
That's what I'm saying. That there has to be some wiggle room. Like if Amaram is like hanging off a cliff, Mufasa style, does he have to save him? Like I don't think so.
I agree. I think yes. What I'm getting at is not I think they'll have to save Moash. I think it is their being consumed with vengeance is antithetical to being consumed with protection. Like it's right. They're kind of two sides of the emotional coin. Somebody did bring me the thought that was really sad. Like we've talked about how Sigzil could have gotten to the fourth ideal. Like he's thinking so many times in this book, oh, I can't save them, but I really need to. I wish I can't save everybody, but I really need to. And I'm like, that's the fourth ideal. Like you got to accept it. And somebody pointed out that the suppression fabrial would not have affected him if he had reached the fourth ideal. So in the moment that Vienta is about to be killed, if he had said, I accept that I can't save everyone, he would have powered up, he would have gotten his armor, and he would have been able to go and save Vienta. So ironically, like, not being able to accept protecting her is what meant he couldn't protect her. Kind of similar to Dalinar at the end of Oathbringer. Kaladin's inability to accept that he can't means that he can't. I hadn't quite put that together with Sigzil in this book.
Right. It tends to work out for all those people though. Like, yes, Kaladin can't accept that he does get to save Dalinar. He does get to save his father. So I think at some point we're going to have to see somebody not saving someone. But because it tends to keep working out in their favor anyway. But yeah, I
think for Kaladin, I mean that is the weird part about it. Like it, and you can see why Brandon has struggled with it, because there's the scene early in Oathbringer where he fails to save Elokar. There's the scene later with Dalinar. Because in any of those, if Kaladin swears the ideal, it also then neuters the whole moment of the scene, because then he just saves everybody anyway.
Right. 22.
So I think he had, like, Yeah, Teft is kind of the only real example where he's accepting that he couldn't save somebody.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi,
Well, but he
Enrique.
didn't know. He didn't
Yeah.
know that Tech was dying, so it's
Oh,
not. He didn't have an ability to.
yeah. Well, yes, that's true. That's very true. Oh, well, again, kind of a weird. He was so obsessed with like focusing on the pursuer, right? So that vengeance, that like I will fight you mindset. He wasn't there with Teft, which I mean, it made sense. Like they had a plan. I'm not saying he did anything wrong. It just, um, Josie said, "Did either of you read Sunlit Man?" Yes, we have read Sunlit Man. You are welcome to discuss any and all Cosmere stuff here. Sunlit Man's very good. I maintain that it is a fantastic fantastic Cosmere book as a like your 50th and as your first, and it's going to be a wild ride either way, and it's super fun. So
Yes, it was my favorite of the secret projects by a lot. And also, I still think you should read it before Wind and Truth.
yeah, I think so too.
This
I
is like
think
a
particularly because it almost like it creates this tension where at some level you think, well, Sigzil has to make it through this because he doesn't have his armor yet. He doesn't have, and so it kind of like it both makes you worried for him, and also you're like, oh no, he'll probably be fine. Like that's going to be a later thing. And so the gut punch of it all is, it's brutal.
I also thought like the mystery of what happened to his spren was really compelling, and it was something that we talked a lot about when we were discussing the previous chapters. Like we were like, no, that's going to be way into the future, and it wasn't. But it also like it was, and I thought that the reveal of who Ox is way cooler if you've read it first. But I can see like again, but I don't have the luxury of choosing which to read first, so maybe other people will read it first and say, no, I really liked the experience of reading, of reading Wind and Truth first, and then and then diving into Sunlit Man. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll also be very interesting to compare the experience of people who read physically both, because the audiobook narrator for Sunlit Man gives Ox such a distinctly different voice than 12124 or 122124 has. 12124.
12124.
Yeah, 12124. So that'll be interesting because like I could imagine giving him like once I know if I read Sunlit Man second, as soon as I figure out that's Zigzil, I'm like, wait a minute, auxiliary. And I don't, it might even take you a minute to put it all together even then because he doesn't get called auxiliary in Wind and Truth. So it's one of those things you might not even realize it if you read Wind and Truth first, because auxiliary isn't an important name until you read Sunlit Man. So
right.
It's who knows?
It might be also like one of those things where it's like, why is he calling him an auxiliary? That's such a random word to call. So like it's not, and things like that like are very clear nods to because of the timeline of when the books were written. So Brandon knew that people were going into it having already read Sunlit Man. So then like pointing it out felt a lot more like, oh my gosh, he's doing the thing. So it'll be, I mean, in general, I think it'll be really interesting to see, like, now that the first arc is finished, the people who read Stormlight from Way of Kings to Wind and Truth all in one go versus the people that had to wait 10, 15 years between books, between the first and the last book. So that'll be really interesting to see, like,
Yeah, does it get considered the novella? Because you have Edge Dancer, you have Dawn Shard. Does the community treat Sunlit Man like the novella between Rhythm of War and Wind and Truth? Hornier should take that place, but we haven't read Hornier yet, so who knows what Hornier will be like.
All right. I feel like I'm just predicting for the future that people will read Sunlit Man after Wind and Truth. Yeah. Which kind of makes me sad because like I said, like I think that there's something really fun about reading it before, but I think just in general, like when you have the people who do like how to read the Cosmere, they're always going to put it after Wind and Truth.
Yeah, I mean, you're the only people who won't will be your publication order diehards, which is always a fair way to read. Like it's the way the books were published, it's the way people read them historically, because that's just how books work. The new book
I
comes
very
out.
much like it.
Yeah. It's not as amorphous as like Pern, where you can literally read any book pretty much at any point in time. But it is a like, within series, if you go from one forward, you're usually good. But then he throws a Secret History or a Sunlit Man in there, and you're like, well, I mean, you could read it here and you could read it there, and
Yep. We'll just have to wait and see.
I think I would maintain, and like if I'm doing a video or if I'm talking with somebody, I would say Sunlit Man anytime after you've read like the first 4 Stormlight and the first. Yeah, I think anytime, really. I mean, it just you'll miss a lot of references, but at the end of the day, it gives you an imagination of what will the Cosmere look like in 100 to 500 years, and it's so far in the future and it's so vague that it doesn't truly spoil anything. It doesn't go, ever since Odium became Retribution, the galaxy sure has been crazy, or if you follow my theory, ever since Scadrial blew up, this whole system's gone wild, hasn't it? It doesn't say any of those things. It's consistent with a lot of them.
Yeah, I think the only books that I would say you should read would be, books 1 through 4 of Stormlight. Although there are always those people who started with Avengers Endgame first, so I don't know.
Yeah. I think even it's one of those things, because one of my favorite reviews ever was, I think it was Murphy Napier on YouTube, who was talking about her dad who read it, who hasn't read any Stormlight, and was just like, oh, this was the craziest Western in space I've ever read. And it just, it just hits the ground running and it goes, and it's confusing and mysterious in the way that Westerns were, and it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are like little things that you'll be like, huh, what was that? Like sort of the fact that when he sees Hoyd, he says Cal. If you haven't read the rest of the Cosmere, you'll be like, who's that? That never came back. What was that?
Yes. Yes.
But like, there's no like big plot points that hinge on you having must read, the rest of the Cosmere. So
yeah, it's more so it gives you all these little tidbits that then if you're reading Era 2 and you're like, wait, Malwish, Malwish was a civilized tongue in Sunlit Man. Wait, does that mean the Malwish are flying around in space now? And it's a good foretaste of what's to come.
Yep.
Which scares a lot of people. I totally, respect that. People want their fantasy to stay fantasy. And I think we've even talked before about how it can be a little concerning when we start moving towards space opera, Star Wars, Star Trek level confrontations. The Midnight Brigade.
It's something that I was really worried about, and now I'm only mildly concerned because like we talked, because we talked, like, I'm not a huge sci-fi person, contrary to my obsession with Red Rising, but like in general, sci-fi is not really my thing. And so when some of the books that we've gotten more recently in the Cosmere, like Lost Metal, I was sort of feeling like, like, is this gonna not be for me anymore? And then Wind and Truth really eased a lot of those fears, because I felt that it was moving into a direction of, yes, we're going into the future, but we're still so character focused that I was like, okay, I'm willing to go along with you. But so we'll just have to wait and see,
Yeah, I would say. Also, oh, go ahead.
I think also, just like one last thing about that, was the thing that's really going to hold me in the Cosmere is the fandom. And like, that's not something we've really talked about, but going to Dragonsteel was such an amazing experience. And like, I think that we as Cosmere fans are maybe able to forgive a lot of things just because this is a really great space to be in. So yeah. I think there's that as well.
Yes. And if you end up discouraged in the Reddits or in, the 17th shard pushing the glasses up on the nose, like, you just got to find the right, there are crazy people that love the Cosmere, but there are also just so many genuine, awesome, wonderful, fun people that love the Cosmere. Goodness.
Yes, like John.
Oh, John
So,
S. Yeah, he's
yeah,
concerned.
I'm with you, John S. Like I was also a little I'm feeling much better about it since having read Wind and Truth. So
Yeah. I think the big test points will be Era 3 of Mistborn. You start to enter into that modern day world. So it's the least fantasy-esque. I guess it's urban fantasy is what it becomes at that point. Isles of the Emberdark might also give us a good idea of how that's going to feel once we're in spaceships and we're exploring, the galaxy or the cognitive realm through a spaceship lens.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like for me, famously, I was not a huge fan of Mistborn Era 2, and so especially Lost Metal, I felt like was just throwing so much jargon at me, and I had kind of the same issue with Yumi, and so that's sort of where I started going like, oh, I don't know, because it's like it's the stuff about the sci-fi that just doesn't work for me. But I don't think Brandon will ever get to the like what you're saying is very true. I think that Mistborn Era 3 and Isles of the Emberdark, which is really going to be our first foray into like this is now we've moved into the more modern era. We're moving into the sci-fi era of the Cosmere. And if Brandon is able to keep it character focused, and then I'll be okay with it going forward. If like it gets to be it's a lot more of the Lost Metal Yumi, I'm gonna have a harder time with it, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. I think it's really he's always done a great job of having fantasy books that appeal to both the fantasy and the sci-fi sides of the sci-fantasy community, because the sci-fi folks, as a general principle, seem to really get on board with the science drives the fiction. Like the rules of the science are important. That's Brandon. Like his whole magic system is science rules. It's just allomancy or surge binding or whatever. But then also the characters are so big and so important, and the way that they interact with each other. So I'm excited to see what he does with it. Speaking of characters interacting with each other, the singers and Ba'aru Mishram and
What we were supposed to talk about 30 minutes ago.
I think that will be our we'll talk about that, and then I think we're nearing 8:15, and my wife is expecting me to to end sometime around there. But I do want to talk about that first. So what did you think about Ba'aru Mishram's capture being such an intimate, like tragic moment? That was really, I was surprised to see that happen, and not to see it, but I was surprised to see how it happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wasn't expecting it to be as emotional as it was. I was sort of expecting, I don't know what I was expecting actually. I had a feeling we were going to see the betrayal of Ba'aru Mishram, but I wasn't expecting it to be like an opera.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was like a really, and the especially like the image that sort of stuck in my head was well, I can't remember what his name is, but the human guy, who like then like after Ba'aru Mishram is contained, and now all of a sudden the singers are just no longer, I mean they're still sentient, but they're much reduced. That was just really horrifying. And to know that then it stretched for hundreds of years or whatever, however, I can't remember how long it was, it is really sad. Like it's the knowledge that they weren't able to get back together, and we don't know what it's the whole thing was yeah, it was a really good scene.
I did not like when they start talking about like, oh, he's gonna take them over here and he's gonna meet with them secretly and all this stuff, and you're like, what's gonna happen? I don't know what's go. And then the idea that it's a secret rendezvous of human singer lovers who are trying to bridge the world, and
and what could have been if they had actually gone through with it, like if like yeah is yeah.
Well, that's
And Ba'aru Mishram ended up being really cool too. Like she ended up being kind of a cool character as well, which I wasn't sure about how that was going to go down, because she was a little bit like she was sort of just like the villain character in the beginning of Wind and Truth. And I think also like going back to what you were saying before, like the fact that I was so invested in this like very minor side story was a real testament to Brandon's writing ability.
Absolutely. John S. says, I'm still not clear how her capture caused the Deadeyes, or was it more because Tanavast wasn't honorable? My understanding is that she had connected to Roshar, like she had invested and connected so much to the rhythms of Roshar and to the Spren, such that when she was captured, it like ripped their connection. It's similar to Elantris when the line is messed up, and so now the city isn't functioning. They're kind of like stuck in this transition, and so then they're not able to move forward. It seems very similar to the Rayode or the Shayode that affects the Elantrians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then separately, Tanavast gave everybody visions of how they were going to destroy the planet, even though it was only a possible future. But he was like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And so they all went, well, I guess we can't be Radiants anymore.
Is Tanavast the real villain? Is the question.
I think Cultivation's the real villain. Tanavast seems to have been trying real hard. And I think he shows himself not to be the villain because he doesn't destroy Odium. He saves Roshar. Like, he recognizes, I could destroy my enemy right now, and that's what the power wants me to do. But it would hurt so many people that I'm not going to do it.
I also thought it was really clever the way that Race is able to trick him into being forced to abandon his godhood. I thought that was a really cool sort of like put him into like a, into a lose-lose situation. That was a cool little bit of trickery there.
Oh.
Yep.
Gosh. Yeah.
And we'll have to do this next time, but we have not talked about R'lain or Renarin and their letting go of Rodimus.
Speaking of the singer romance that bridges the worlds and has the chance
it's been like 2 months. How long has it been since Dragonsteel, and we have yet to talk about all of that stuff. So, there's so much we haven't covered. I mean, to be honest, we like, I have an unhealthy obsession with Adolin, and so I was bringing that up like every video because I just want to talk about him.
Yeah, and I have my Zeth and Nightblood obsessions, so it usually ends up coming back. And in fairness to us, each week we've usually brought on like a new person, and then we'll talk about their emphasis and their theories and questions and things. So
yeah, that's true. Okay, I'm letting us off the hook then.
Yeah. If you are watching and you have a part of Wind and Truth next week that you'd like to talk about, send a message, send a comment. We have lots of videos on the TikToks, on Instagram. Shandle's on there. I do I upload these to YouTube most of the time. Sometimes the editing gets really weird and it's not a very good recording. And so I'm like, I don't want to do that. But let's see. Any other final thoughts about, that was just a frustrating scene to see how close the humans and the singers came to peace, and to see them get set back thousands of years because Ishar and Malishi just couldn't conceptualize that.
I guess the only other thought was this sort of bridges what we were talking about with R'lain and Renarin. Why did Brandon have to both start with R's? Is the scene where I think they come across Malishi's body where he's still holding the gemstone was so cool. I thought that was a really kind of cool little, like, sort of he gets lost in the spiritual realm and then he just dies there, and he's like so consumed by his own, desire to do what he thinks is right, or whatever his, compulsions are. But I thought that was a really cool, I thought that was just a cool scene.
Yeah. Maybe the second big hint that the Gavinor champion thing is possible, because we see somebody age and die in the spiritual realm. So that would indicate a person can age there. Somebody else on Discord, I don't know if you saw it in the Cosmere Talk Discord, they were talking today about, I think it was Seth, how one of the first comments Wit makes is, you got to be careful. You could spend 20 years in the spiritual realm and pop out, what felt to you like only a day later. And Gavinor does the opposite. It's 20 years for him in the spiritual realm, and only an hour later for us.
I mean, I remember when we read that chapter, and that was sort of when we started going like, oh, maybe this. I fought it for a very long time because I did not want that to be the case. And I think, by the end of day 2, we both were like, that's what's going to happen. But it was sort of around.
That made any sense. There just wasn't time to set anything else up.
Right. And we went through every possibility. I'll tell you, the one thing that still kind of frustrates me is that we weren't able to figure out who the author of Wind and Truth was, because you're not able to figure out who it is. It's, and we went through any Cosmere character it was possible to conceive of, we went through them. So.
Yeah, the Redditor who was like, it's a random Shin person, ended up being correct. It was a random Shin person.
Well, a random Shin person who's married to a character that we know very well, but still kind of a random Shin person.
Yeah. I was just thinking about how it's really funny that Odium Taravangian walks through how Reyes had considered the 2 other main candidates we'd talked about, Moash and El. He's like, what? I could have brought Moash up here, but, that would have been not dramatic to do it that way. It's like, okay, Brandon. Okay.
Yeah. Do we want to end quickly on our thoughts on Moash not finished? Because I see there's 2 comments.
Here. Michael Miles and Combat Wombat. We've talked before, but Moash gets some really cool moments and then just doesn't get a lot in this book. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means he's going down in importance or if he's going up in importance, and Brandon wanted to save his arc for, the back 5. Will he come back with 10 more spikes of crystal all over and he's got new superpowers? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think in terms of in a writing standpoint, this is not the book for Moash. And I knew that kind of going in because of where Kaladin's story was going. It didn't, and I still think that Kaladin, it has to be Kaladin versus Moash at the end. However Moash's story ends, it has to end with Kaladin. So we knew where Kaladin's story was going here. It just didn't seem likely that it was gonna. You okay?
Yeah, I'm alive.
Okay.
Gosh. Oh my goodness.
I hate when that happens.
It's the worst.
At first I thought we were getting really emotional over Moash and Kaladin. I was like, wow.
I probably would. Moash. I think there's a lot of room for him to feel his feelings over the next 10 years and have that not lead him in the direction that Taravangian wants. But we'll have to see.
We shall see.
Josie, I don't think Cal is gonna forgive Moash. I don't think that's gonna. He's the herald of second chances. I would love this, because my line that would make me throw the book at the wall for Wind and Truth was, Moash smiled as the Syl spear formed in his hand or whatever. But can you imagine if it's Moash and Kaladin and he goes, I'm the herald of second chances, not 13th. And just stabs him with his Syl spear.
I know. How many times do we have to go through? The Cosmere fandom is the most forgiving. I mean, there are people who are like, no, Moash can still redeem himself. And I'm like, how many times does Moash have to kill somebody that we care about for you to say enough is enough? But yet, here we are. There are still people who want a Moash redemption arc. But, so...
Combat Wombat. I'm the herald of second chances. Except for that guy over there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I hope we get something like that. Some kind of, nope, that's not what second chances means. But that's part of therapy too, is realizing that kindness, gentleness, and forgiveness don't mean a lack of consequences for people who do bad things. You can be kind and gentle and forgiving and still kill Moash at this point.
Yeah, it's sort of like if you told a woman who was being abused by her husband, like, give him a second chance. Like, no. There's some people who just don't deserve, that you did give them the second chance. It was
Yeah.
going back to them the first time, and then you cut them off and you say farewell.
Yeah. As someone who lives in the South, we have a lot of that runs around here of like, well, that's just what it means to be loving. And it's like, no,
Oof.
that's not what that means.
Yikes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
not
this
good.
was, gosh, I mean, I remember the first time I heard this, and like again, I talked about this, how the concept of a Moash redemption arc was like so anathema to me. Like, I was just like, what are you talking about? And somebody like mentioned, I don't know if this is really a thing, and I've tried asking like some of my friends who are LDS, they were like, oh, this is a very like LDS thing. And certainly like in Christianity, I think the idea of redemption or forgiveness is a huge aspect. And like, I don't know, like maybe this is just like, and I was like, oh, maybe culturally this is just not a thing for me. But then I've spoken to a lot of people and they're like, no, it's not a thing for us either. So I don't know, but it's like an interesting.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things people point to, and it's totally valid, is that Christianity has the really big character of Saul that gets blinded and then has like blinding light, restore his eyesight and all this, and goes from like being a persecutor to being someone who's on the good guy's side. So like Moash was kind of like, well, maybe we're getting set up for that arc. Like, I don't know. But then he gets his sight back and he's like, all right, let me go kill some spring. So it's like, okay, nope, never mind.
Oh, that's probably what they were talking about. Because I was like, to be honest,
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about like Christian theology. So I think I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I think like love thy enemy is certainly like a thing or whatever. I don't know. But in any case, it was an interesting point, because at first I was just like, what are you talking about? Why would anybody want a redemption arc for Moash? And I think like the I think we've talked about this like ad nauseum, but on a theoretical level, like, yes, I do believe in the concept of redemption. And so, theoretically he could redeem himself, but it would be very unsatisfying narratively. So, which is why I buy the Dalinar redemption arc and not Moash.
Oh yeah. Also, like, it's one of those things, going back to what you had mentioned that Brandon had said about Moash, like Kaladin does the right thing in these situations, Moash does the wrong thing. Like, even comparing him to Dalinar, when Moash is confronted with his wrongness, he just runs away from it. Whereas when Dalinar is confronted with his wrongness, he steps into it and says, you're right, I'm so sorry, I want to be better. Unless you're his son, and then you just send him your sorrow and apology emotionally after the fact.
Text
or
message.
you think,
like,
I will never get over the troll.
Mom,
right? I'm still stuck on the trolling in the spiritual realm that Brandon did, where on Stormfather's like, your son's in here, and he's like, Adolin? Adolin's in here? No, Dalinar, your other son. Kaladin's in here? I need that. I need that. Like, we've talked about Cradle before, which is a wonderful series. But they do bloopers at the end of every book. He'll write like a 10-ish, 5 to 10 pages of bloopers into the end of the book. And I would love one where it's like, Dalinar, your son's in here. Adolin? No, Dalinar, your other son. Kaladin? No, Dalinar, your other son. And then he's like, Sureblood? I just cannot think of Renarin to save his life.
By the way, when is the last time we see interaction between Dalinar and Renarin? Is it Rhythm of War? Do we see them interact at all in Words of Truth?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think the last time that we see that Dalinar says anything to his son, at least on screen, is the end of Rhythm of War. Not even the end. I mean, like the middle of Rhythm of War.
I'd have to look back. I don't even remember them talking in Rhythm of War.
Yeah, they
I'm
do.
sure it happens.
There's the scene where Renarin shows him the vision. Remember, Renarin pulls up the vision, and he's telling Dalinar about. That's it. I think that's the last time we see them interacting with each other. Which doesn't mean that they didn't, but yeah. And also I know he sends his text message apology with spiritual energy, but he doesn't send an apology to Renarin. Renarin's mother also died. I don't it's just the selective parenting or lack thereof from Dalinar is questionable.
It would be really funny and really on brand for Adolin if Renarin and Dalinar have just been having weekly chats about it this whole time, and Aelin's like, my dad won't talk to me, and Renarin's like, just talk to him. Like, what are you talking about? He won't talk to you. He absolutely will.
Oh god.
That'd be funny.
Yeah, I would also I think it's sad that we didn't really get any Renarin and Adolin scenes in this book. I mean, we have like a flashback with two of them, but that would be something that I'm also really excited to see in the back half. Would be, I really want them to have more time together, because we have the scenes where they are together are great, and we don't get a ton of it. So,
yeah, totally agree.
And because, okay, last thing here, I promise, and because the because of that moment where Kaladin, remember when in the beginning of the book when we have the red herring of maybe Kaladin's going to become king, and he thinks like, now officially Renarin and Adolin will be my brothers, and it was like, I want that also. Like, I want to, Adolin and Shallan and Kaladin are going to go to the bar with Renarin. Like, can we please stop forgetting about this poor child? But
no, I love that idea. And I mean, there's still room for Kaladin to end up having to do some, because heralding, in theory, once the war's over, he can just be on Roshar. So,
yeah,
I don't know. Cool. So next time, Renarin and R'lain and all sorts of fun stuff there. Plus maybe, I don't know. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
As evidenced by tonight, one concrete topic from the book is probably a good a good target to shoot for.
Oh gosh.
Sweet.
Alrighty.
All right.
Sounds good. Sounds
Bye,
like a plan.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.